Okay, so in the fifth module of managing in big data, we were doing with Hadoop related tools, right? Under the Hadoop related tools, we had completed HBase and we were going through Cassandra, I suppose, right? So we had completed some part of the Cassandra. We were looking at the Cassandra's data model. We were looking at the different aspects of Cassandra database. And I suppose we had also completed something about the CAP theorem, where we discussed about how consistency, availability, and partition tolerance works, right? The special mention about the data model which is used in Cassandra. So these are some of the things that I just wanted to recap before we start ahead with some more topics, right? And the database family which is used in the data model of Cassandra is a column family based system, right? We had also mentioned that the querying language that we speak about with respect to Cassandra, which is called a CQL, is very, very similar to that of SQL kind of statements, right? And the database or the data model format is something like this, which has a key value pair, right? The value starts with different family of different family that can be housed with that particular key, right? So there is an optional super column which can be used in the data model, which is basically a label or a metadata kind of a columns, which is basically used for indenting the product names, indenting the column names of that particular column, right? So the super columns are both tuples as well with name and value itself. So the data models, which is the data types which are supported in case of Cassandra, is the bytes type, UTF-8 type, lexical UUID types, time UUID type, ASCII type, and long time. These are the data types which are supported. Right? When it comes to the write operations which are there in Cassandra, the write operations are on a random node request. Right? That is, the partitioner determines the nodes that are responsible for this data. It writes locally to the operation and makes sure that it's an in-memory version of the write. And commit log is basically used to dedicate the disk local to that mission. So the typical flowchart for a write operation may look something like this. A client requests for a write operation, a commit log gets opened, right? The commit log which is on the disk, there is an add table value where the mem table and the memory has works on it, and we have a flush wherein which it goes and sits into the SS tables, right? So when you talk about the other way of looking into the write operation, you have keys which are column family names. The commit log basically has the column family names, which is binary serialized names, right? And it is also pointing to the mem table, which talks about a particular column family name, right? Once when the column family and the data type and the objects, then everything is being fit into the mem table, it's finally is flushed onto the disk file on the disk. So we have also discussed something about compaction, where we have discussed about merging of serializable data, where where the compacted versions of the files which are kept are are merged into a single data file, and the remaining part of the file is completely deleted. That is, the part of the serialized data which is spread across multiple parts, they are basically stripped apart or they are deleted, right? These are the compaction options that we have seen. So then we also have write properties, where no locks are used in the critical path. Sequential disk access behaves like a write back cache. Appends support without a read ahead. Atomicity is guaranteed for key. Always it's a writable kind of a scenario. So when it comes to read options, the query for the read result, right, is there in the cluster. The read is basically done by finding out a replica which best has the data that can be that has been requested by the client, right? So there are multiple ways in which the read basically happens, right? And before you look into the read operations, where replication and partition comes into picture, you must also know that whichever is the closest replica that matches with that particular query is being first fetched, right? If the result is not satisfiable, then again a digest response is spread across multiple replicas of that particular node, that particular request, and the data whichever is there in whichever is replica that is available, that particular data is basically fetched with it, and that is given back as a result to the client. So then we have something which is very important under the consideration of the read operation. One is partitioning and other one is replication. Now let's say that you have got two nodes, one node which is at the center of the circle, and you have got another node which is at the other end of the circle. So you need to do replication for it. You have got node A, B, C, and then you have got a hash key. Hash key of that particular data item is first hashed into the replica A, right? Then a hash key of 2 appears, and the closest replica which is available based on the distance formula calculation is C. So it gets replicated onto the node C. So then whatever are the data that is being stored, the key part of the hashing that is being done, a direct path is connected between A and C, where the replicas are stored in between them. Then you also have B, which is also connected to A, which can store any amount of data. Then you also have C, which can discover itself with B, right? So then there is a complete partitioning which is allowed. One partition stays in A, the other partition stays in B, C. The B node, which is there in this particular ring, is left out with no partitions. So what is basically done? Another node is added into this particular segment, which we call it as D. Then another root gets established between D and B. You also keep adding some more data nodes into it. You add another node of E between A and C, another node F between A and D. So likewise, you keep doing it, and finally you come to the case of replication. So when the number of nodes were 3, right? So the data gets replicated not just in A, but it also gets replicated to F and B. So the complete cluster size now becomes CEAF. And then you have got EAFB. So the cluster membership and failure detection, there is a protocol that is used in the Cassandra based system, right? As we have already discussed, the Cassandra based system does not allow one point of failure or a single point of failure in a system. So the cluster membership is basically determined by a protocol called as gossip protocol. Now this is a lightweight, mathematically provable property based protocol, and it takes the complexity of O of log n rounds, where n is the number of nodes in that particular cluster, and t is the seconds that each member increments its heartbeat counter and selects another member to send its list. So the member which is at the end basically merges this list into a own list. So the gossip protocol works in this particular way, right? Let's say the node which is marked as red in this particular scenario is the starting point of our discussion. Then you have got a round between a node 1 to 2, right? Node colon 2 basically is a round between node 1 to 2. Then you have 2 to 4, right? Then you have another 2 nodes which are being activated. So usually what happens when you keep gossiping in a real world instance, you gossip to a person who is closest to you, right? You gossip to a person who sits next to you, or who gossips to a person who is very close by. So the same technique applies here, right? So whichever is the node which is on the other side, a data is sent. then the gossip protocol starts, right? Where it starts, gossiping with the neighboring nodes. So this gossip spreads to all the nodes except one particular node in the system, establishing and discovering all possible paths which are available in that particular system. So the benchmark here is the loading of data limited by the network bandwidth, right? The read performance of the inbox search, whatever that we are trying to talk about, is limited by the network bandwidth, right? You can see that the median or the min average and the minimum time that is required for such interaction are 7.69 seconds, 15.69 milliseconds, and 26.13 seconds. So if it is a term search, right, it is 7.78, 18.27, 44.14 are the search related time that is required, right? This search is basically into the search is basically into the search is basically into the round read operation of that particular production. So when you compare MySQL with respect to Cassandra, with a database size of somewhere around 50 GB, MySQL write operation basically takes approximately around 300 milliseconds. A Cassandra's write operation basically takes 0.12 milliseconds. So there is a lot of difference in the write operation itself. Similarly, when you say that you are doing a read operation, the average of this is somewhere around 350 milliseconds in case of MySQL, and it is just 15 milliseconds in case of Cassandra. So with this example itself, you will be able to understand the impact of time with respect to the comparison of MySQL. So this is the comparative aspects of CAP theorem based database with respect to ACID related database. So these are some of the core examples with respect to Tomcat, where you are trying to look at the configuration related settings. So you can, I am just pausing here for a moment so that you can just have a look into the way in which the XML coding is basically done in Tomcat for Cassandra configuration. Okay, so moving further ahead, you can also see some more examples with respect to the containment and Spring configuration with respect to Cassandra. Spring Hibernate was a special tool and technology which was used in Java at that particular point of time. And there was a concept called as Enterprise Java Bean, for which you can basically see how the data item or the data object and the business class along with it used to be merged, right? That was the Spring Hibernate technology which was used way back in 2000, 2005 and 6 and things like that. So as and when the industry moved ahead, we had some replacing technologies with respect to that that also. So this is a sample get operation of Cassandra, a code sample of it, right? I'm just going to pause here for a moment so that you can just have trace through this particular algorithm, right? Where you can find out how the item is fetched from the database. Okay, so just look into very important blocks, right? We have got try and catch blocks here, right? All of the operations that is done with respect to database leads to database exceptions or IO exceptions. So these exceptions are to be caught in a Java-based programming language, right? You have to find out what will be the exception that when certain things do not connect, or some there are examples or there are instances where something can go wrong. Such exceptions are to be caught in the examples, right? You can also see here that the block is just not with the try catch, it also has a finally block, right? The what happens with respect to this is you have a try and a catch. Whatever that is being written in the final block of this particular code is what is going to be executed, right? And again, within that finally block, you also have another try catch instance, right? Which basically has some more exception that is to be caught. So this is how it works in a Java language. So this is a code example with respect to Cassandra's update operations. So the update operations, whatever that we are trying to talk about, updates with the columns, right? Because we are talking about a column-based architecture data model, the column is supposed to be updated. Here you may use a column or you can use a super column also here, right? Column or a super column updation can also happen in this case. And whatever that is to be updated is basically is in this set of lines of codes, right? Where you are trying to update certain things with respect to the data, or you are trying to update certain things with respect to the super column. So these are the details which are there with respect to this. Okay. So now we come with another two important technologies with respect to Hadoop, which are Hive and Pig. Right? These are also very important tools which is used in, with respect to the Hadoop. Right? Every tool, as what we have discussed in the early part of the this particular unit, are again tools which basically sit on the MapReduce to do certain jobs. Right? Similarly, when you talk about Pig Latin is basically a scripting language. Hive is basically a query language. Right? So why is that there is a need for high level language? These are the important things. Hadoop is basically used for large data processing, which is written in Java, and everything is in verbose and very slow. So there is no way that you can change the code that are written in Java. So the solution is to write statements which are very much above a high level language, right? High level data processing language, and hence two important tools basically came into picture. One was Hive, which is called as HQL, which is a Hive query language, which is similar to that of SQL. The second one is Pig Latin, which is like a Perl scripts. So Hive is basically a tool which is used for data warehousing applications, right? Where the query in the HQL is a variant of SQL. Tables are stored as a flat files in HDFS. This was first developed by Facebook and now it is a open source. Then you have large scale data processing systems which require scripts to be written in Pig Latin, the data flow language, and developed by Yahoo, and it is an open source system. Roughly 1/3 of the Yahoo internal job runs on this particular pig. So the common idea of why having a higher level language is just to facilitate large amount of data processing, where higher level languages can compile down into the Hadoop jobs. So trying to make things very simple and making sure that every data item that we are trying to talk about can be retrieved, can be processed, can be stored, can be accessed, can be searched. So to facilitate these kind of operations, we basically need to use certain high level language systems like Pig and Hive. So a background about Hive is that Hive was started in Facebook, right? It was basically used to do night cron jobs in Oracle DB. It was hand coded in Python, right? It was basically called as an ETL tool before, right? It grew from tens of GB to TBs in 2007. Now it is somewhere around 100x of that, right? It is being shown as 10x, but now it is in 100x more than what we had actually started with. Right? That is the way in which the data is basically working today. So the Hive components are shell, which allows an interactive queries. You have a driver session, which basically handles, fetch, executes, compiles certain queries. You have compiler, which is used for parsing and plan optimization. Then you have got execution engine, which is basically a DAG of stages where MapReduce, HDFS, and metadata are being processed. Then you have got metadata stored, which is basically schema that is stored in HDFS SERDE. So these are the components of Hive, right? Imagine that you are trying to do a query execution with MySQL, right? In that particular case, you will need a parser which can parse your queries and break them down into a simple statements, which is understandable by the background engine, whatever that is being created, right? Similarly, here also, you need compiler which can parse over the data, right? And that parsed data will help the execution engine to execute that particular data in which has been parsed, right? See, please try to understand one important thing. The system will not understand the high level language statements. It can only understand something which is being relatively known, something like a binary related data. So whatever that we construct above it, there should be a way to translate these high-level query languages into the queries which are understandable by the system. Right? That's the reason why you need an execution engine to take care of these data. Right? So similarly, I've got shell which is used for interaction. Right? Any software that we talk about must have a GUI or a UI for conversation, for submitting some particular job. So to do that, you have a shell where you can submit the jobs. Similarly, I've got drivers which are used for session handling, fetching, executing, and so on. Right? You also have a meta store, which is basically used for loading and unloading the schema into HDFS. So the data model which is basically used in Hive is a typed column. And this typed column can be of integer, float, string, or a Boolean type. It can also be a list map type, which is like a JSON object. So these are the different types which are supported by Hive. Right? Then you have got partitions. For example, you have a range partition tables by date. That is, the partitions are executed with respect to range of rows which are sorted by date. Right? Then you also have buckets which are hash partitions within the regions which are used for sampling, and join optimization. Remember that Cassandra is only a language under the NoSQL theory which allows the join optimization. None of the other databases which comes under or which falls under the category of NoSQL supports the join operations. So the meta store, whatever that we talk about, are columns of columns or data of data, right? So the metadata or the meta store stores the namespace containing that particular table. It stores the table definition, right? It also stores the primary partition information about that particular data store, right? And then you also have Derby and MySQL, which are many relational databases, which can also be stored in such kind of, which can also be used for storing the metadata. So the physical data of a warehouse is basically stored in HDFS, and the deployment path of that particular path is /hive/user/hive/warehouse, right? And then you have tables that are stored in subdirectories, right, of that particular warehouse. Partitions form the subdirectories of the table. So then you also have actual data which is to be stored in flat file, and this is controlled by a car delimited text or a sequence file. So this is a custom SERDE which can be which can have arbitrary formats. So a Hive example looks very similar to that of an SQL database. A relational join on two tables, right? Let's say that tables of word counts from Shakespeare's collection and tables of word counts from the Bible, right? Now you have got two tables which are both having the word count of different collections, textual collections. Now let's say that we are supposed to merge these two tables or join these two tables relationally. Then the count is basically given for these two things. Then the merge can happen with something like this. Select s dot word, s dot frequency, r dot frequency from Shakespeare as s, join Bible as k on s dot word is equal to k dot word, where s dot frequency is greater than 1 and k dot frequency is greater than 1, ordered by s frequency DESC limit to 10, right? So this can be the query that can be used for this particular example. Now we will have to see what happens behind the scene when a query gets submitted to the execution engine of Hive. So once when the query gets executed, right, the query is converted into an abstract syntax tree, AST format, and then the data is broken down into the format that is in a tree particular format. Now after this is done, which is an extract of how it looks like, right, then you have got one or more MapReduce jobs which basically handle this particular scenario. Then based on the dependencies and further plan and other things, you may see that the data will be either extracted, sorted, and used with various dependencies, right? So these are basically the steps which is involving the query processing, right? The queries are processed in different ways, right? So you know that the query processing step in case of the MySQL engine looks into parsing the data, breaking that into simpler statements. Then again, you have got data which is extracted and it is combined with it is passed by the tokenizer, and then it is created with lot of other intermittent hierarchies before it is being submitted to the local engine, right? So you've got elaborate amount of steps, which basically talks about lot of things with respect to MySQL, right? So behind the scene for any kind of query processing system, you will see that the data is floated, the query is converted into a format which is understandable by that particular system, and you may see the output with respect to that. So there are the different steps that will be used in this particular query processing engine. We also had some samples of this query processing way back when we studied our SQL systems in the UG studies, right? You know how a query processing engine basically works, right? It parses, it converts it into lexicons, it again converts it into different formats before it is being completely understandable by the underlying system. So there are many steps with respect to this, right? So Hive is also one thing which does the same aspects. So this is an example of a data analyzing task, right? Where the user finds good pages which are rated, right? You know that there is a tool called as Google Analytics, which basically collects the analytics of data that is where the users have visited different websites, right? So this particular data, whatever that we are trying to use, can be used for a system called as PageRank, right? So if you go to data mining, PageRank is one important application, right? It is one important algorithm which is used for analysis, right? Similarly, Google Analytics also uses PageRank for lot of such details, right? So you have PageRank to understand how many times a particular link was visited in a particular day, right? How many times that the how many times did the user visit it? Were there returning users, right? Were there new unique users? So these kind of analysis will be done with respect to such systems, right? And you can see that every time when a user gets logged in, right, and user visits a particular website, his time and the count will be captured with respect to the URL, right? With the URL, we can capture the time as well as the count and the origin where he has basically come from, right? And then you have got PageRank, which will basically rank this particular system, right? And based on the number of times a person has visited this particular link, the ranking will basically happen with certain formulas. So this is a very simple data analyzing task. So the conceptual data flow for this is something like this. The user visits where the username, the URL, and the time is captured. The pages on the other side with PageRank is captured, right? Then they are canonicalized into different URLs, right? And then there is a join of URL which happens on the left hand side and the right hand side. But this join operation, whatever that we are trying to look at, is nothing but the URLs which are common on the user visits, the URLs which are common on the PageRank side. And after this join operation is being performed, then you use a group by user, and then you compute the average page rank. Now, when you are computing the average page rank, it is the total number of times that the URL is uniquely visited by a user divided by the number of entries corresponding to that particular URL. So you compute that average URL, average page rank, and if the average page rank is greater than 0.5, you declare them to be as a popular websites or popular URLs. So this is the conceptual data flow of how a page rank basically works. So when you talk about a system level data flow, the system level data flow is something like this, right? The visits are basically stored in a database. the pages are also stored in a database, right? They are first canonicalized, right? The meaning of canonicalized is they are streamed into lines, right? Separate lines where URLs are visibly seen, right? Then a merger happens between the left-hand side, which talks about visits, and the right-hand side, which talks about pages, using a join by URL query, right? And the remaining task will remain the same as what we have seen in case of our conceptual data flow systems. So I am very sorry that this particular code which is being written is written in a very small font, right? And it has been pasted on my slide. But I wanted to ensure that the entire code with respect to PageRank is available in a single slide. So once when you get a handhold of this particular slide, please copy paste this particular code, right? I will not go through the explanation of this code because this is a very lengthy code, right? You can execute this in the MapReduce environment and check what is the output for that particular URL page length, right? Before you do that, you must have two texts or two databases which talks about visits and the other one talking about the page rank, right? If you have that, you can basically run this particular code, merge the database and compute the page ranks. So this is what I just wanted to discuss about, right? I will basically stop with this for today, right? And again, join in the later next week, so probably to discuss about the remaining things with Pig Latin and other details. So we are left with some more tools in this particular segment, right? We will be dealing with these tools in the coming slides, right? Coming days. So probably next 1 week, I'll be in a position to complete the entire syllabus with the different Hadoop related tools. Okay, so I will stop at this. The copy of this particular recorded lecture will be available in your Google Classroom. You can go and look into it. Right, we can also have the materials which is uploaded in Google Classroom. Right, very importantly, your grading sheets. Right, that is your results of the quiz has already been put up on my MBD Classroom. Right, just go there and have a look into it. Right.